So I'm going to call to order the Winooski Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have just one item on the liquor control meeting tonight. This is a first class, third class, and outside consumption permit and restaurant license for the Fusion Cafe and Bar LLC located at 211 Main Street. And I believe our applicant is attending, yes?
Yes.
Oh, welcome. Bola, would you like to introduce yourself or say anything about your restaurant plans, or correct me if I mispronounced your name?
You're right. I'm Bola, owner of the Fusion Cafe and Bar. We're going to say hi to everyone. Yeah, the Fusion Cafe and Bar located in 211 Main Street, Winooski. It's going to open very soon. So just waiting to have the permit from you guys.
Excellent, thank you. Any concerns from staff on this permit?
No.
None. All right. Are there any questions or concerns from council? Would someone like to move to approve the first and third class and outside consumption permit and restaurant license for the Fusion Cafe and Bar?
So moved.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Bola.
Thank you.
All right. We look forward to seeing that new option on Main Street, and have a good evening. That brings us to the end of our Liquor Control Board meeting agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I just realized that Bryn was joined and appears to no longer be joined. I'm going to shoot her. What's that?
She enrolled. I said to restart her computer.
Okay, thank you. It is 6:02 p.m., so I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. We'll start with agenda review. Are there any concerns about the order of the agenda this evening? All right. So then it is time for public comment for items not included on tonight's agenda. I see two attendees in Zoom, but I believe they are both here for agenda items. There's no one present in City Hall. Meredith or Charlie, if you did have a public comment, not for an agenda item, feel free to use the raise hand feature. All right, so we will move to the consent agenda. We have the minutes from our council meeting on October 4, and we have the accounts payable warrant from 10/14 and payroll warrant for period 9/19 to 10/2. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? All right, hearing no concern, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. So we are going to move to council reports. Who's first? Hal, you're first on my screen. Can I start with you?
Sure. Well, the State Company Connected People Commission did not meet last Tuesday as was planned. It wasn't properly formed, so we're meeting tomorrow. And I do not have a report at this time, but we'll have so at our next meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Jim.
So I've continued to participate in the Municipal School District stakeholder group. We had a remote meeting presentation last week and 2 weeks ago, and an in-person meeting at the school with a handful of teachers and students. But some good discussion after that of moving forward towards November delivery dates. So that's things
great, thank you. Mike?
Hello, everybody. I have nothing to report tonight.
Thank you, Mike. Bryn, have you been able to connect successfully yet? Excellent, welcome. We are in city updates. Can you not hear us? Is that the? Bryn, are you able to come off mute?
She says that she can't hear anything,
Oh, no.
that she's going to come to City Hall.
Okay. I will do my city updates. So speaking of City Hall, I am here. We are still having mask requirements and social distancing here at City Hall. But it is open to members of the public who wish to attend in person, should they be able to follow those guidelines. And we're going to make sure that myself or another member of council is present for meetings going forward, until such date that we either go full in person or, hopefully don't have to retract it all based on what's happening with public health guidance. Since our last meeting, I wanted to mention I was able to join the State Director for Housing and Urban Development and the Executive Director of the Winooski Housing Authority to recognize a local resident, Pabitra Katawoba, for her time and volunteerism as a resident of the Winooski Housing Authority. There's a HUD program called Unsung Heroes of Housing that they were recognizing this Winooski resident for. She spent a lot of time and of her own time supporting the Housing Authority staff and her neighbors, acting as a sort of liaison to help make sure that critical health messaging went out, was received by residents. They understood what was happening with operations within their building. So I just wanted to also share her name here publicly in recognition. I received an update from the acting director of aviation at the airport that they anticipate launching the public portal for access to the noise monitoring system this Friday. So we have a noise monitor here at City Hall. They have a couple others installed in the area beyond Winooski. And that noise data will become publicly accessible. They're gonna put out a press release on Friday that will have information for residents on how to access. And we will share that out in our channels as well to make sure folks know how. Since our last meeting, the Finance Commission did meet. They approved changes to fundraising and scholarship policies, which will come forward to us at a future date, and looked at last year's budget memo and budget book and offered input on how to make those items more accessible to members of the community. So I know Angela is using their feedback to make some tweaks to what we see this year, and hopefully it'll be easier to engage with for us as well. Planning Commission met as well and continued reviewing parts of our gateway zoning and actually set a public hearing for November 11th. That's going to be an opportunity for public input on changes that are being proposed in the gateway zoning district. Following that public hearing, the commission could make further changes, they could host another hearing, or they could pass things along to us here at council for further review. So we shall see. I was also able to attend a ribbon cutting at Park Terrace, which is the new development on East Allen Street by Manso. This includes 45 units of mixed income housing that are affordable, market rate, and a few units that are managed by COTS for folks at risk of homelessness. There are studio 1 and 2 bedroom units there. So a project that meets economic affordability differences as well as household size differences, which are goals in our housing. So I wanted to highlight that is now this has added some housing availability to residents in Winooski. Also of note, while that event was occurring, there was F-35 flyovers, and I was inside of the building, and it was notably quiet indoors. So I know that's a question I've heard as to whether new developments are addressing that noise issue as they are constructed, and at least in this case, they were able to. The last thing I want to share is that I spoke a few meetings back about a task force in the legislature that is investigating changes to the pupil weighting in the state education fund system. So there was a study on our education funding and how to make sure that it equitably services all students. That was received in the legislature in 2019. This task force was developed to look at how to implement recommendations from that study. Hearing from leadership at our school district, they are not pleased with the direction the task force is going in and believe that should the study recommendations not be fully implemented to update the weighting of pupils in the education funding system, we may actually lose funds in Winooski that we need to support our particular student body here. And so I have provided some testimony to that task force in the past, and I'm coordinating with leadership at our school on other outreach or advocacy that we can do to make sure that the legislature is hearing from Winooski what we think we need to support students here. And I wanted to bring this up for two reasons. One, they are hosting the task force is hosting a public hearing on October 29th at 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It can be attended at the State House or via Zoom, and I will share this information out in my mayor's update this week, but want to encourage members of our community to attend that public hearing and share that it is important for Winooski to retain funding to support kids that need special education services, English language learners, folks coming out of families living in low income and in poverty. Those are things that the education funding tries to account for, and what the study is saying we need to do more of. And I also just wanted to share this with the full council as well, to get your support to continue advocating there. And I'll follow up with you all after connecting with our school leadership later this week. That is the last piece of my update. I will pass it to Phoebe or John for city updates.
Camera's coming over my way.
It looks like it's you, John.
Yeah, sorry, I do not have any updates for you tonight. So
Great.
I'll pass it over to Phoebe. Sorry to make you pan over.
Phoebe.
I just have a couple of updates, and they are related to Halloween. So we're still seeking volunteers to help support Halloween in Winooski, and that includes for pumpkin picking on Thursday and Friday. So we're still looking for volunteers for that, and to sign up for any of the volunteer activities, you can email info@downtownwinooski.org, and also visit downtownwinooski.org/Halloween. And we are also doing pumpkin carving on Saturday and Sunday, the 23rd and 24th at the Senior Center, and that's happening from 9 to 5. And if you can't make those carving days, you can pick up as many pumpkins as you want to carve, as long as you bring them back by October 20th.
All right, thank you. So we are going to move on to our regular items, and first up is on for discussion. We have Charlie Baker here from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission to share with us an update on their annual report. John, Phoebe, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
I'll just add that, we work pretty closely with the CCRPC, and they're a major resource and asset to us. And can't speak highly enough for Charlie and his team.
That just took me a moment to get plugged in here. Thank you.
But that's all I had. They're great folks to work with.
Thank you. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, good evening. Glad to see you all. And I always check to make sure this is not a bad assumption, but our annual report did make it into your packet. Yeah, so this is, I think all of you have gone through this before, but this is really my annual check-in, customer service check-in with the city. So I'd like to briefly review what's in the report. And apologies, I'm on a small screen, so I can't see your faces. So let me know if you're making a face at me or want me to pause. But the first page of the report is really just background about the Regional Planning Commission, our board membership, a little bit about how we leverage your municipal dues to bring in state and federal funding to our communities in the region. And at the bottom, it has your representatives on our board, our Transportation Advisory Committee, our Planning and Clean Water Advisory Committees. And I do want to thank you for the staff's great participation as well as Mike and Abby's. They're really valued members of the commission. Any questions for me just on the background? Okay. On the second section, starting on the top of the second page, are a number of projects that we have done with the city over the last year. And I'm happy to get any feedback on how that has gone or any of those projects, positive or negative. But any feedback for me on those projects?
Well, I will say that a lot of the work that you all support us with, like phosphorus control plan, the Elm Street stormwater, water quality planning, emergency planning, GIS, like there's so much work happening behind the scenes that isn't publicly visible, that we don't talk about here, that people don't see, that's actually really critical to our infrastructure, to climate and sustainability planning. And if I did my math right, there's like $200,000 in work that you all have done for us. So also helping with, our fiscal situation here. So I want to echo what John said, thanking you all for the ongoing assistance. I also will call out for council, the transportation impact fee is on there. CCRPC has done what we've asked to date. If we want to revisit that, that's something that we'll need to initiate at some point.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Yes, I'll keep moving through this. The third section on the third page reviews some of the projects that are in our transportation improvement program, which mirrors the state's transportation capital program. And you see what's in that program, the dollar amounts, and what we know about timing right now. You're probably as well aware as I am that sometimes that timing can move, but it looks like a lot of that stuff is in really this fiscal year. So if it hasn't started at the end of the summer, they may be starting in the spring to still make it in the fiscal year. Any questions on those projects? I'm not necessarily the expert in all those projects, but if there's anything you'd like me to look into, happy to do that. All right, probably John knows much more detail about all those things than I do, so good. And then in our work program, currently, as the mayor just mentioned this, the traffic calming policy is still work underway in this fiscal year. And then the last few pages have a lot of different things that we've been working on without regard to any specific municipality, so more region-wide work. I'm just going to call out a few of those and then see if you have any feedback from me on any of those or other thoughts. One is that we are going to try to have a legislative forum again in early December. And so if there's any issues you'd like to have put on that table or on that agenda, please let us know, please let Mike know. Definitely, I have no idea yet what we're planning to focus on, although there seem to be some continuous familiar themes about smart growth and permit reform and other things like that. So heads up on that. The next topic at the bottom of page 4, which carries over on page 5, is on public engagement and racial equity. And this is just to let you know, and really since the last time we talked, we've engaged with a consulting firm who's helping CCRPC walk through some equity work internally, but we also did interviews to understand what our municipalities are doing, And, we're trying to, I think, have one eye towards whatever we develop and things that we do, if it can be helpful to other municipalities, we'll share that, rather than just solely focusing internally. And actually, let me pause it. That's a big topic, and I'm sure for Winooski in particular, if there's any feedback for us on that. I don't have a lot to report yet, although I should say we are hosting a November 6th Equity Summit. I'm hoping you all got invites and are aware of that. Let me know if you did not.
I should be attending that, and I believe that our equity director has registered as well. So thank you.
Oh, great. That's great. Thank you so much. And we are trying to get, we've also done extra outreach to other BIPOC organizations and residents. We're trying to make sure that we're actually hearing from BIPOC residents in that. I think what comes out of that will probably set a large part of the agenda in terms of what we work on in the coming months. And Representative Colson.
Yeah, Charlie, good to see you. I'm involved with the planning team for this event, so it's really taken nice shape. So thanks to you and your team for taking this on.
I don't even think I knew that. Thank you for helping.
Sure, no problem.
All right. Sue was keeping you hidden in the background. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for helping with that. And then the other what I want to touch on is building homes together. We issued a press release a couple weeks ago, kind of talking, concluding kind of the first 5-year Building Homes Together campaign. We set out with a target of trying to build 3,500 homes or 700 homes a year, with 20% of them affordable. We did end up averaging more than 700 homes a year, but we did not get to our affordable target. We only did 112 affordable versus 140 on an annual basis. So, which isn't horrible. We got 500 plus more affordable homes. But I think when we looked at the big picture data, it's still pretty discouraging. The housing market is not really that healthy here. The vacancy rate very low for rentals. Prices certainly on the ownership side have gone up. The inventory for just things on the housing market are very tight. So we are looking for any, if there's things that the city has seen that would be helpful for us to kind of push in the next 5-year campaign, please share any thoughts or ideas, or even if there's a question you want us to dig into a little bit more. We are actively thinking about what to do. We started it off 5 years ago asking, really, a big part of it was financial, asking the state to do a housing bond, which they did end up doing a few years ago. And of course, now that seems like a small amount of money with the amount of ARPA funds and federal funds coming. So I don't think the request is going to be all about money for affordable housing, but there are definitely a lot of other issues. How do we get housing in the kind of the missing middle, where the private market is building high-end homes. The affordable homes are getting built, of course, by organizations like Champlain Housing Trust and housing authorities and stuff. But the missing middle, where's the workforce housing? Is it still a big issue? So anyway, let us know if you have thoughts that would be helpful. I do think I'm kind of curious also a little bit about Winooski's experience because you are certainly, I think, building a lot of homes and getting a lot of redevelopment. Just driving by, it looks like the form-based code is working, on your gateway zoning district. So glad that we could help with that way back when. But any perspectives coming from where you guys sit?
I will defer first to Jim or Heather if you want to share anything.
I was going to defer to Heather first, because she always has to
Heather first, then Jim.
I remember.
Yeah, I will point out that in Winooski, the numbers that Building Homes Together has are not entirely up to date for Winooski. We did meet the affordable housing goal, so we exceeded the 20%, and we exceeded our proportional share of those 3,500 homes. So I think something is working in Winooski, certainly. And I don't want to miss that in the narrative of, you know, we didn't quite hit the affordability. Winooski did. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And Heather, I haven't looked at the detail. That doesn't surprise me. That makes perfect sense. Any explanation that you put out there for, as we work with other communities, about why you think you were able to meet those targets?
it's a combination, I believe, of form-based code. I think form-based code is absolutely working. It's less expensive for people to develop here, and that predictability that form-based code gives people allows to know what the costs are going to be associated with building housing here. In addition, I think there's strong political will to be part of the solution with more affordable housing, and that runs the gamut from city council who have been strong proponents for it. And this has been something we've been targeting for years. So I think across the board, it's just something that is important, an important value for me.
Yeah, thank you all for supporting that. Yeah, I think it's great to see what's happening there. So, sorry, I didn't mean to go too far down any one rabbit hole, but, I'm sorry, Councilor Duncan.
Thanks. I'll just add on. I think what Heather said is exactly right. Like the ease of the predictability in permitting, and we've also managed to maximize low-income housing tax credit applications. Like we are taking full advantage of what's available in Winooski, and we're seeing that utilization is very strong by developers and the agencies that support them in developing affordable housing. So that those two things together, the predictability and ability to take a maximum advantage of those resources that are available at the state and federal level, has been what developers and the finance agency identify as why Winooski's hitting that target or exceeding that target.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, and is there anything else? I'm not going to review the other regional things on the back to the end of the report. Or Mike, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to highlight from your view.
Not really, but Charlie, maybe can you give a little update on exit 16? Or is there an update?
Yeah, I mean, the last I'm hoping you've heard what I've heard, which I think is they're planning to start doing some construction work in the spring, I think. But I don't know, I'm always afraid to put a date on it, not knowing if there's one more piece of litigation or something else that could throw a monkey wrench in it.
And I'm sorry, I'm assuming that folks on the council know what the plans are up there. And especially I think it's important to Winooski because it will help traffic as well as pedestrian access up to the exit 16 area, that Shaw's and Costco, that area.
Right. Yeah, and is it okay? Have you been getting updates from, I think it's Mike LaCroix is the V-Trans project manager?
Yeah, I see the 16 DDI emails come through.
Okay.
And John, you're looped in on that.
Yeah, we work pretty closely with them, especially with the Main Street project. So our understanding is they're going to be starting the utility work, some of the underground work next spring, and some retaining wall work, and a installation of the multi-use path that's going to connect up to like Shaw's Plaza. And then the following season is when they're going to do the heavy sort of transportation work.
Yeah, John, I think it might even be a 3-season construction schedule.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've heard too. Yep.
Yeah. So, these things are never easy, so apologies in advance for the pain that will go along with it. But I do think it will definitely function a lot better than how it functions out there today. There have been, if you haven't seen it, mostly because I've seen Burlington City Councilors copy, but I don't know that there is a gentleman in Burlington, Tony Reddington, who's been asking to get re-looked at to do 2 roundabouts as opposed to the DDI design. I don't have any sense if V-Trans is going to take him up on that suggestion, but just in case you hear about that from some of your peers, there have been some email traffic in the last couple of weeks about that. So, but as far as I know, it's still on track. Well, I don't want to take more time out of your busy agenda unless you have other feedback for me or other questions about other projects that were listed there.
Yeah, council can raise hand or grin in person.
Yeah, I have a question about the
Elders and Persons with Disability Transportation Program.
Okay.
Let's see, that's on page 7. I'm just curious if there's, what the plans are for FY '22 or the remainder of FY '21.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling to where that update is, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think this is mostly identifying that part of our scope of work with VTrans is to facilitate the E&D partnership. I haven't heard much in the way of other changes coming. You know, I think they're still, you know, to be honest, recovering from, you know, the depression of ridership that happened because of COVID. So I think they're still just starting to recover. I think maybe on the second page you'll see, or second or third page, there's a little bullet about E&D also that I think had Winooski had 210 rides in FY21. So obviously we'll update those numbers as we get more. But was there something more specific you were wondering about?
Yeah, how do you have a sense for demand? How is it advertised? I feel like I have heard requests and inquiries about transportation, especially transportation for folks with disabilities, and wondering what type of communications outlets and outreach that are utilized with the program.
Yeah, and so thanks. And I think we try to help a little bit. It's really a program of GMT primarily, but also of SSTA. I'm sorry, and let me know if I raise your hand if I'm using too many acronyms. But yeah, GMT and SSTA, and there's a couple funding streams in there. So I'm not real sure about how well they advertise it. I think they, you know, certainly make sure the people at 211 know if somebody's calling for some services, and then at least it's my hope that they're getting the SSTA number to call for rides. But if that's not something that's really publicly aware, I'll try to dig into that a little bit and see what the publicity on it is and
Okay.
share that back with you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ray, go ahead.
Hey, just to chime in on that a little bit, so we have a fairly low allocation through that program, and so in Winooski, we've not done a ton of advertising of that because historically we every year have hit our kind of threshold. So we do a little bit of advertising through our senior center to folks we have contact with there. Definitely some through AgeWell, as Charlie said, through some of the other kind of more countywide channels, but a lot of the advertising is really word of mouth. And historically, again, pre-COVID, we were typically hitting our allocation for the year, and then folks from there get shifted over to some of the other countywide pools of money. So AgeWell has a larger allocation because of the match requirement. So admittedly, Brent, we've not done a lot of advertising there just because we haven't necessarily had the capacity through our specific pool to accommodate further usage at the moment.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a financial issue for most of our municipalities. There has been, the demand has been increasing, and there are expensive trips. And so it's funnily, that's not even a word. It's, I'm not sure, it was designed kind of funny at its startup in Chittenden County, this system. And so some municipalities are part of the SSTA service and others aren't. It's not completely rational, but it also now has, sorry, I must be late in the day, I'm getting more frank with you. It's, and we kind of dug into this a lot with United Way a couple years ago, and we really haven't come up with a better way to reorganize the system yet or have it work better. And this is just also related to just how the transit system in general is supported by property tax dollars from municipalities to do the match, which is, I think, what Ray was just referring to. We are working on a study with GMT and VTrans to bring back to the legislature about different alternatives for funding transit in our region and statewide. Just because, Ray, it doesn't seem like the right thing to do to not offer our residents a service, be out of this kind of weird budget impact. So could we get to some sort of better place where it has, isn't on the back of the property taxpayers to fund that system? But that is a bigger issue that's out there.
Yeah, thanks for the details. I do think that there's interest out there for these services, and I'd be curious just what kind of statistics or demographics data that is relied on for developing the budgets around this and coordinating services with GMT and SSTA. So just don't have to kind of go on any further with that at the moment, but just wanted to share that I'm hearing level of interest there.
I believe that. And Ray, I don't know, are you able to share kind of what the situation is, at least for the city? I don't know, or follow up with it?
Yeah, I can definitely look into that some, and I think just to add on, one other kind of wrinkle of the program is that based on the different entities that carry budgets, they set the parameters for their rides differently. So we have very restrictive parameters for the Winooski program, which are pretty much limited to medical trips at this point, because again, our budget is pretty small for the city portion. Other communities or other programs that have larger allocations have much broader parameters. So social trips, grocery stores, trips to the mall to do the mall walking program in the morning. So it is, to Charlie's point, it's a little bit of a patchwork, and it's not the most cohesive for the customers across the county. It's definitely a program that I think needs to be looked at, and I know, like Charlie said, there's been a group through United Way that's been kind of working with RPC to look at that the last few years. So, but I can definitely look into some of a little more detail on some of the data that we get. But because it's a small sample size, it's one dialysis patient can really like skew the whole system, because that's a high volume ridership, and like Charlie said, the trips are pretty expensive. So I can definitely dig a little deeper on that and bring something back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And any other feedback for me or questions? Well,
All right.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say thank you for your time tonight, Charlie, and for you and your whole team, and also to Mike O'Brien for continuing to represent us with you, with the RPC.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you, Mike, for serving. Mike's our immediate past chair now, so still on our executive committee and very, very involved, and also serving on our equity leadership team, which wasn't noted there. So thanks, Mike. And thank you all.
All right.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So we're going to move on to item B. This is on for an approval. It is an event permit for Halloween in Winooski. I think Heather will introduce, and I believe we have Meredith Bay-Tyak of downtown Winooski joining us.
Yep, absolutely. So staff has received our event permit application for the annual Halloween in Winooski event. And for the last few years, that's been held in Rotary Park. And the centerpiece of the event is 1,000, close to 1,000, as many as we can get, lit jack-o'-lanterns in Rotary Park. And that draws hundreds of residents and visitors to the center of our city every year. This year, the event will be held Friday, October 29th through Sunday, October 31st, from dusk until when the candles burn out. And this is the first year that downtown Winooski is taking a lead role rather than partnering with the city in a lead role. So we're excited to have that, and there will be a supporting partnership with the city. So we kind of reverse roles here. We recommend approval of the permit, and because the event is co-sponsored by the city, staff also recommends waiving the $200 Rotary Park fee. And you have a map that shows the Rotary Park being used for this event, but there is an additional space request with this, which is on Winooski Falls Way as well, and that's specifically for the Recreation Parks Department to hold some activities for kids. So I will have Meredith Bay-Tyak, the executive director of downtown Winooski, explain a little bit more about that.
Thank you, and welcome, Meredith.
Hi, thanks, Heather. So this is an event that's happened many times before, and we're excited to bring it back. As Heather mentioned, we are going to be activating that space on Winooski Falls Way, the hardscape, just for, 2 or 3 10 by 10 pop-up tents. We will also be utilizing a space near the river for projecting a movie, and those will all be under Jenny's purview from Rex and Park. So we're really excited to use that space, make it outdoors. I think this is in part due to the fact that we're still in a pandemic and many children are not vaccinated. But I also do think that utilizing an outdoor space, considering the main portion of this event is also outdoors in Rotary Park, I'm excited to see how this is received by the community. And I'm really grateful to the city staff and especially Ray and his team for really working hard on this as always. We're excited to be taking a lead role on this, but we rely heavily on the city for everything. So thank you.
Thank you. Hal, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Meredith, what movie are you going to show, or movies? Just Boris Karloff, or I don't know.
I think it will be a family-friendly movie. Ray can probably speak to the movie that's being played.
I actually can't yet.
Okay.
Jenny has made the decision, but I will be honest with you, I'm not sure which movie it is. It's a Halloween themed family film.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry not to have a better teaser than that.
It's definitely for all ages. We know that. It is not going to be skewing older. It's going to be starting at 6:30 on Friday. So we're going to be expecting children and families and people of all ages.
Thanks.
Hopefully not scaring them too badly.
There's no Halloween movie with the return of Michael Myers. Come on.
I mean, maybe next year. I don't know. We'll see.
Are there any other questions from council? Looking forward to, you guys did a great job supporting last year. Looking forward to seeing the new options added. I will just quickly solicit, is there any public comment or questions about this? Please use the raised hand feature in Zoom. All right. So I am looking for a motion to approve the event permit as Heather described, along with the park fee waiving.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Good night.
Good night. We are going to move on to item C. This is another event permit on for approval. I believe we have Stephen Berbecco joining us as the applicant.
Yep, and I'll introduce it quickly before turning it over to Stephen. We've received an event permit application for Spooky Street to be held October 31st on Leclerc Street between Spring and LaFountain Streets. And effectively, this is a Halloween trick-or-treating block party. So they're looking for a street closure, which is why it requires city council approval. And Stephen was also the sponsor of a previous block party earlier in the fall, summer. So they have experience with this, and it worked pretty well last time. The event review team met with Stephen to discuss how shutting down the street last time worked, and there were no concerns about this. So staff recommends approval of the street closure and event permit. I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Thanks, Heather, and good evening, everyone. Heather, you set it up really nicely. And the only thing I would add is that we anticipate the participation of several mummies.
Awesome. Any questions or concerns from council? Sounds like a great event. Can I get a motion to approve the Spooky Street event permit?
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, we are moving on to item D. This is our FY23 budget goal setting discussion that Angela will assist us with.
Absolutely. So included in your packet were two memos, one of which you normally get in September, but with the lack of a city manager, there was something that fell off our plates. That outlined the proposed schedule, follows the same schedule that we have used used in the past, with the council receiving their first full budget in December and detailed presentations to follow through January. What we're looking for tonight is an approval of that schedule and then some feedback from council in terms of what we should be doing for our FY23 budget for increases. If there's any areas where you think funding needs to be directed, in the event we need cuts, what are places that could be trimmed back? We are in a pretty good spot to start off, given that normally our health insurance increases are between 10 and 13%, and we are actually seeing a 7% decrease for FY in 2022.
Thank you, Angela. I was going to say, before we dive further into the goal setting, just do a quick check if council have any questions about the schedule or if it looks good.
I think the schedule looks good.
All set
Yeah,
with
I
this?
don't have any concerns.
Okay. So let's go back to goal setting. And do you want to just talk a little bit about the other assumptions baked in, Angela?
Yeah, there's not a ton that we know yet. We have made an assumption in our models so far that COLA for February to February will be about 3.4%. That's based on some data that is from economic projections. And then the grand list growth has been conservatively projected at 0.8%, which is what we've historically used for this. We will be sitting down with Eric Forwald and the assessors to come up with a more targeted number as we get closer to setting the final budget. Those few items that we've set out so far are projected to cost about $51,000 additional compared to the current year budget, or a 0.73% increase. But there are some unknowns. The AFSCME contract does expire this year in June and will be up for negotiation, so could have some additional cost implications. The school resource officer is still under discussion with the school, which is reimbursed to the city for about $55,000, so nearly a penny on our tax rate. And then we have the personal property equipment down at 133 Elm Street that has the potential to leave the city and would impact our grand list value.
Thanks. And I do want to call out something new in this memo at the bottom there. You can see there's this new breakdown showing what an average homeowner, property owner is paying across services, to give an idea. This is something that we've talked about including in the public presentation as well when we get towards town meeting day. Also want to add, we had a discussion about this at the Finance Commission. Some general takeaways there. So historically, as a council in the last couple years, we've basically said we want to see level services, not a reduction, but not an increase, while staying under the cost of living adjustment, which is usually around 2%. Finance Commission felt like that's a reasonable approach we've been taking. You know, we have already made significant investments in the Main Street project and the pool, and on the other side of the tax bill, the school renovation. And that we may want to continue that approach as we focus on leveraging ARPA funding for more short-term needs, and then taking the time to think about planning for the increased revenue with the TIF expiration in FY24 versus trying to add stuff in for next fiscal year. So just wanted to share that general input as well. I think the question tonight would be, is that the approach we want to take, or do folks feel like there is something that we should be considering adding or do folks feel like we should be considering a reduction or a lower increase than our general 2% COLA target? Jim?
So I'll weigh in on that second question first. I think we generally do target COLA, at least the times that I've been involved in this process, we've used that as the benchmark. It is going to be higher this year. And with inflation, with potential inflation as well, I think we should be shooting for under COLA. But I still think our historical increases around in the high ones, low twos still seem appropriate as far as a target. So in other words, I wouldn't want to suggest that we shoot for COLA this year. Just because that I think adds pressure on pressure. But I'd like to see us still maintain a level of increase that supports the programs. And I know we're going to have some pressures from the pool and from some of these other capital improvement projects with materials costs. So I want to leave flexibility for those and try and strike a balance between staying at a historical low twos, high ones, but not going up to 3.5 increase. So that'd be my initial reaction to that second question.
Thanks, Jim. I would be supportive of that approach as well.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we should be matching COLA. I think we should be aiming for under it. I think that additionally we were overspent with the pool, and I kind of anticipate a second year that we probably will be closer to what we spent this year. Just, getting, again, our feet under ourselves with that and getting things dialed in for a second season. Hopefully we'll see more revenues with things opening up, but that'll, offset. And I do anticipate, Main Street, I don't know where we are with getting the easements set in, but any delays there could increase costs. So just, again, to basically support what Jim mentioned already is anticipating some continued spend around capital projects, but staying below the COLA, because I do think that will put significant strain on our residents.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Is this Jim?
The one thing that I think has come up a couple times over the past couple of years is we've seen an increased focus on housing issues in the city, and with ARPA funds coming through that have a potential support for, or additional money for that. And I think the challenge that the Housing Commission has been identifying around coordinating amongst all these different programs and pulling all the strings together. And we always just say, Heather, you can do it, right? And Heather says yes. And I think that's awesome. And I think she's doing a great job. And I just sometimes wonder if you need more help, Heather. So that's something that I would be interested in hearing from staff about, is whether there's need for additional staff support for addressing our housing related issues in this kind of unique time where we have extremely low vacancy rates. We have high demand, we have a lot of interest in building, and we have a lot of different ways that people are talking about getting the mix of housing that we need. And do we need more capacity to capture and coordinate with all of our partners on that? So I think that's something that I would be interested in hearing as part of this budget building process, is if there's some staff capacity potential increase there to take advantage of these funds and make the best use of them.
So given that the COLA estimates for February to February, which are in our personnel manuals and union contracts, is estimated to be 3.4%, and our salaries and benefits make up 57% of our general fund budget. In the event that having those integrated in comes out more than 2%, is there a place that the city should scale back, or should we present to you that number based on that actual COLA?
I mean, I would want to see that number for sure. If I think about areas of scale back,
I just don't want to come back to you with something that goes above like 2.5% because of a salary estimate of 3.4 plus step increases. That's level services.
It feels like this year we may have overcommitted on some recreational services. I'm not sure if any, if there's room there to reduce demand, and how much that would on demand on the general fund, and how much that would even make an impact offset. But it did feel like this year we might have overextended our commitments in that area, and sometimes having fewer programs that are more robust in quality, and that may be an area that we can look into for consideration.
Right. That would potentially impact revenue as well. The increased recreation program was related to the ESSER contract with the school. So the school is paying us to provide the extra programming.
So it's not based off of number of participants, it's based off of number of programs offered?
So some of them are number of programs, but some of them are participant based. But you know, the more programs you have, the number of children that participate also increases. We billed out over $19,000 for the month of August.
I might say excluding the things that are tied to ESSER and the youth programming, and look more at stuff that targets adults. I know also, we haven't seen the capital plan recently, but like in the past, there was wood chipping the dog park, for example. And so like, are there less critical items in there? You know, we resurfaced the tennis courts recently. That is also the sort of thing that you can defer potentially. So I'm not sure what else is included in that. I think that's something to be looked at. And then public works wise, like, I know we do landscaping activity, mulching, things like that. Is there room for reduction there? Versus, you know, the more critical pieces of public works like street sweeping and road maintenance. I think both of these suggestions are probably on the smaller scale of financial impact.
But also may have less impact if they're deferred.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
There are other comments from council, questions?
I guess I want to put a plug in. I know there's a lot of funding for housing coming our way, but I think that needs to be balanced with support for childcare services. So I would want to see that there's some balance in there to the extent that ARPA fund is able to be accessed for that, and federal and state funds are able to be accessed for that.
You know, Angela, I don't know if you can answer this, but I wonder if there's a potential to use a portion of ARPA funding to do that sort of coordinating and focused work across whatever programs or whatever we decide to engage the money for.
Childcare is definitely something that is listed under ARPA, but we would have to be very strategic in how we deploy that funding, since it's only short-term money. If it's something that we want to continue long-term, we would have to think about how we could fund it after the ARPA money leaves.
Hal, I see your hand.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. You know, as we get further into these conversations, I just think it's important that we remind ourselves that in my view, a budget is a moral document. It really speaks to what we believe in. So I think it's important to keep that front and center as we make these decisions on what to cut or what to not cut, so that it does speak to our values. Thank you.
It's a good point. Is there any other specific feedback that would be useful at this stage? Jim?
All right, I can put my hand down and let that question be answered first. I think that'd be more useful.
Angela, did you need it? Is there any other specific feedback that you're looking for?
Nope, I have enough feedback to compile something to come back to council with in December.
Okay, Jim?
And I think the only other piece, so I went through the kind of policies and priorities and looked at what was desired pending additional resources. So if we are looking at additional funds, a way to if certain commitments will be covered with ARPA funds that we don't have to cover this coming fiscal year. Some of those recommended ones, I think there's the housing renter protections and options there would be kind of fall under that. But the other one that kind of rose to the surface for me, because I know this continues to be a topic in the Planning Commission and kind of balances on the housing and kind of development side, is our natural areas management and doing some natural areas management planning with not only a goal to recreational use, but natural resource values, climate change preparedness. I think there's a number of all things that our limited natural areas could support. And so if there's capacity to move that from a nice if we had additional money into a recommended category on our policies and priorities, that's another area that I would see worth investing in.
I did have a question. I don't know if there's clarity on it now. Versus about the funds that are allocated to Winooski specifically versus funds that are being funneled through state agencies and opportunities to leverage that for some projects and programming outside of our own direct budget process for the next fiscal year.
I'm not certain what's being asked.
Do you have a sense of whether or not we'll be able to leverage ARPA funds being funneled through ANR and Agency of Transportation?
I'm sure there'll be some sort of grant opportunities for us to apply for, but we have on our books $2 million worth of ARPA funds to use.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'm suggesting is areas that we might be able to postpone or look to say if there are areas where you couldn't apply and leverage through the state agencies through grants, that may be a place to look for some trimming for the next fiscal year.
Heather, I saw your hand briefly. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm on the housing front. Those funds will, I immediately was targeting the state ARPA funds to supplement our housing trust fund. And I went to a webinar about that and found that it would be excruciatingly difficult for us to be able to leverage those funds to get for that specific use. Although I don't know, it's kind of a developing situation with what is being funded and what isn't. But at the beginning stage, they were really targeted to the type of nonprofit affordable housing providers that are looking at 9% low income housing tax credits. And we definitely don't fall into that category. So for that one piece of it, I was looking at that specifically.
Yeah, thanks for looking into that, Heather. I think my thought is for other areas outside of housing, anticipating and already seeing some programs being posted for soliciting applications.
Is there any public comment or question on this budget goal setting topic? Okay. let's move on to item E. This is on for, oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
Sorry, I just did want to note that in the memo, it called out that staff or that council has raised a priority around sidewalks before. We didn't explicitly address it in this discussion, but I think that still remains a priority. I think it speaks to our need to support, especially our seniors, people with disabilities, and moving around the city, that is a continued need. So I just didn't want that to seem like that wasn't important because it wasn't raised verbally here. I wanted to concur with that in the memo.
Yep. Good call. All right. So now let's move on to item E, our priority goal update for economic vitality.
I will take the lead on this, but I do want to say that this is a joint staff effort because economic vitality really runs the gamut across departments here. So if there's further information that you need, we may be pulling in other staff members. This is the first goal update on economic vitality, and this is an update on the FY22 priorities that were set by City Council with the leadership team at our meeting in June. And those will really guide our initiatives working toward economic vitality above and beyond regular operations for the coming year. You'll see before you the standard matrix that we do that lays out all of the priorities and the status of those priorities. So whether they are proceeding as planned, slower than planned, started but not proceeding well, or not started yet. And for all of the priorities that were set at our meeting in June, they are proceeding. About a little more than half of them are proceeding as planned, and the rest are a little bit slower than planned. Just for the community, because this is the first of these reports, I'll give what the priorities are. Redevelopment of 17 Abenaki Way. That's the development that was proposed for a municipal garage, VEIC office building, and a hotel on Abenaki Way. Implementation of the Legacy campaign to celebrate our 100-year birthday. Implement grant-funded wayfinding scope, so installation of wayfinding signage in downtown in the parking garage. Complete a grant-funded equity audit with a consultant firm. Execute the goals of our Vermont Women's Fund grant. Working Communities Challenge grant management and implementation. Seeking funding opportunities to retain businesses and support business recovery from COVID. Expand our downtown designation, and to evaluate and potentially rewrite our form-based code incentives for affordable housing and for for energy efficiency. So I have provided you with a memo that gives you a narrative update on each of those items. I'm happy to walk you through any of those specifics or just take questions, whichever you'd prefer.
Let's do, I think most of this we are familiar with from previous ones. So we can do questions or comments.
Can I call one thing to your attention that I put, and I apologize for not having said it in advance. There were two tasks that are part of the Working Communities Challenge that were separately listed under the Safe Connected People. And so I have subsumed those into the Working Communities Challenge and won't be calling them out specifically in the future, so long as that's okay with you, and just include them as part of implementation of the Working Communities Challenge.
Yep, and I think that makes sense given how the work of that grant and, equity in general crosses boundaries like that. I did, that you brought it up, I did want to say, I saw in here that the grant leadership team, in thinking about the Equity Commission, is shifting a focus to potentially having an equity ambassador sit on each of the existing commissions. And just wanted to share some excitement about that idea. I could see real value in that. And I've heard, commissioners wanting more support in that area. So that was exciting to read about here. Council have questions about any of these that they would like to have addressed? I think I also wasn't surprised by what is delayed and what is not. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Heather and maybe Yaz if you did want to walk through the kind of status of the growth of the leadership or evolution of the leadership team and this kind of shift in focus on the Equity Commission. I'd be Just curious to hear a little bit more background on that, if there's anything more to share beyond what's written here.
I'm going to defer entirely to Yasmin because I have stepped out of that while I went out and applied for the grant. I am now no longer part of that team, so it has been fully turned over to Yaz, who is absolutely hitting the ground running and shepherding this through.
Thanks, Heather. Jim, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what you were asking. Are you asking about the development for new members coming on to the leadership team, kind of the way that has shaped, or are you talking specifically about the talks that we're having around how the Equity Commission is going to be formed and operated?
Yeah, I rolled both of those into the question, but I think I'm more curious to hear an update on the thinking and discussion around the Equity Commission transition to equity ambassadors, and kind of how to articulate this. Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what those discussions are, what the kind of realization has been, and kind of what some of the kind of power that you see in this, and how we can kind of empower these ambassadors not only to like represent equity, but actually help take power and move things forward in those commissions and with the council.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense too. So the conversations that we're having on that team specifically are around, the current structure of the commissions and how, if we're looking at equity work, like we said, we're looking at how it intersects with everything that we do within the city. So if we have a separate commission that is just to be looking at equity, then that means that we're still going to have to be abreast of and pay attention to the work that every other commission is doing anyway. And so we were trying to figure out how we were going to kind of build an efficient system to ensure that the work that each commission is doing is being brought to the table, and that there's an equity lens for all of those groups. And so we started, throwing around different ideas on how to restructure kind of an equity commission. It was, something that came up on the leadership team, and then on the WCC leadership team, and then I brought it to the city leadership team, and we've kind of been bouncing it back and forth since then. I'm trying to figure out what the best model is going to look like, but it seems like we are leaning more towards having like a representative that is kind of a trained equity, somebody who has lived experience, somebody who knows equity pedagogy, sitting on each commission to be able to bring an equity lens to the table, so that when you're considering projects, when you're considering work, budget items, things like that, that there's at least someone there at the table who has the experience to be able to bring that lens into that work. And then the tricky part is like the reporting structure there, because we still are going to have some sort of structure where that team of people gets together to meet to talk about what the different initiatives are. So that's the delay, trying to figure out how we can make that efficient and not have to ask volunteers who are going to be in these positions to kind of double dip and have 2 meetings a month, when they, the expectation would necessarily mean, for a traditional group, for a traditional commission, it's just 1 meeting a month. Typically, I think a couple of them meet twice a month, but so that there would be a little bit greater expectation for folks. So we're trying to kind of weigh that with how we can support folks to be able to do that on the different commissions and get information back to my department, and then to the equity, or to the entire leadership team, and then to council. It's a little bit of a process figuring that all out.
Yeah, and it's great to think about what the burden is and what we're asking of people. And I guess I'm hoping that, because that's the first thing I was thinking, is that how are they also going to then engage with council so that they have that direct line and access, so that we can not benefit, but make use of and build on the work that they're doing. But so I'd love to see the council liaisons have an active role in supporting and then bringing that work back to the council too. I think, because you can't ask them to do 2 meetings, let alone 3 or 5 meetings a month. So I think that sounds really great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Go for it.
Heather, can you speak to the expanded downtown designation? It kind of has just a short summary in here, but do you have a sense for complexity, timeline?
Yeah, so we have to do a 4-year update and check in. It's an 8-year designation. We did that last summer, where we report on everything that has happened in our designated downtown. There's a bunch of statistics that we have to provide. And during that conversation, we met with both the head of the downtown program at the state and also with the head of the neighborhood development area, because currently our form-based code gateways are all neighborhood development areas, which provide some benefits, but not the level of benefit you would get from a downtown designation. And in that meeting, I raised the subject of us potentially expanding our downtown designation. There was support for that, but one of the conversations was that that's something that might normally happen when we do our redesignation of our downtown. So that would be another 4 years from now. So I think there's more, and there is a lift to that. So I think what I would prefer to do is speak with Gary Holloway at the Vermont Downtown Program and see what he would recommend to us and follow his advice on that. So, there is a benefit, and doing it sooner rather than later would be great, but I want to have an understanding of how likely it is for us to be able to do that this year as opposed to holding off until we have to redesignate our downtown.
Yeah, I'd also be curious about pros and cons of, the demand on your time and other staff's time to move that forward in shorter, as well as the offset of if we would miss out on any critical funding opportunities available before the end of 2023, 2024, when allocation of funding is required with the federal ARPA funds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would, with the ARPA funds, I don't believe that would be impacted. There are huge funding opportunities that are associated with the designated downtown. So, we have leveraged millions of dollars because of that downtown designation in grant funding that we would only be able to apply for within the downtown. So I think at very least, if we were able to, in some expeditious manner, make it count toward change the neighborhood development areas to a designated area, I think we could certainly benefit by that. But I definitely think there is some math to do weighing what kind of commitment we're looking at for my time to be able to do that versus doing it all at once with that re-upping our designation as a whole. So definitely that will be part of the conversation.
And how would that roll up to form-based code, planning, commission work, and CCRPC work?
It really wouldn't impact any of those. It's really about getting that designation and thus making us eligible to apply for the program. It would give some Act 250 relief. There are a bunch of benefits that come with the downtown designation, but it wouldn't roll over into commission work. It would primarily be me and some of Meredith's time, I believe, putting that together.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are there other questions from council? Any questions from the public? Again, you can raise hand in Zoom. Is there anything else staff would like to highlight or get feedback on? All right. Well, thank you very much for this update. Let's move to item F and get a similar update for the Safe, Healthy, Connected People priority area.
All right. And I drew the short straw tonight, so I will do the table set. And I think I earned, what did John say? I earned a morning off of changing chlorine tabs at the pool. So thanks for that. But happy to present this report to you all. Similar to the economic vitality approach, I think tried to include some context here at the bottom with just a few words about the details of why we felt like the status was listed as it was. There was one item, as you'll see, listed in red, which I will probably ask John to speak to a little bit, the regional dispatch piece, since he's been our point person there. I think, again, the pieces that are yellow are fairly predictably so. Certainly happy to answer any questions on those, but overall, I think a pretty good first quarter report for us. Felt good to put together, and I guess happy to let John talk a little to the regional dispatch and then take any specific questions you might have.
Yeah, so good evening. Regional dispatch are listed as red just due to the delays and the operational startup of, there's several cities and towns trying to figure out how to become part of a much larger regional one entity type operation that has a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of needed funding for capital investment and startup cost. And each community is in a little different place as far as obtaining those monies to do the startup. And so last meeting, it was voted to delay the operational startup to 22-23. It was on track for 21-22. So for Winooski, that builds in another year. I hesitate to say another year. I believe it will probably be longer than a year for those startups. There was another meeting this morning, and the talk about federal funding. We've been turned down through the FEMA grant. There is some local communications money through Homeland Security, but they will not fully fund the capital request. It will likely be around 1/5 of what's needed. So it's around $200,000. It's not small by any means, but it's not nearly enough to fund the capital needs. So again, all the participants continue to talk through those pieces. The next meeting will be in January for regional dispatch.
Mike?
Hey, Chief. I'm reading it. Wasn't the space secured already? Or was there a delay in this, or has there been a shift in the space that this was going to happen?
So there was a verbal commitment on the behalf from South Burlington under Manager Dorn to hold that space, i.e. not charge and not lease it for with the thought that this was standing up in 21. With the vote to delay to 22-23, the city of South Burlington took that that free offer off the table, and none of the communities at this point are willing to start to fund some of the operational pieces that would secure that space, or the executive director, that sort of thing. So essentially, I don't know the status of that space, but I believe it is on the market.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Any other areas that you all would like some more detail on or have questions about? Again, happy to answer those.
I do have one. I just have to locate the section. Do other folks have questions while I am trying to find my note?
Sure, I have a question.
Go for it, Bryn.
I'm curious about the tower ladder replacement. It's hard to tell from the summary if there's plans to put out an RFP for that.
Angela can help me out, but that is a purchase that will have to go through a bid process. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely would require it. And in addition, we do need to explore financing in order to make that acquisition.
And is there a reason why we, like for insurance or other reasons why we would need a brand new truck versus seeing if other municipalities out of state are retiring a truck that might meet our needs?
So I think all options are on the table. Buying a specialized piece of equipment like that used comes with risk. With our last purchase, we did buy a demo and saved um, you know, almost $200,000 on that purchase by buying a demo truck. So, you know, those options absolutely are on the table in the best interest of Winooski.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question for Chief Hebert. Welcome. The update in here mentions the PD has filled 2 out of 3 open positions. And recruiting is continuing for the 3rd position. Back in April, we had, you know, you had shared having 3 excellent candidates that you wanted to hire. So what has happened with the 3rd candidate? Why is this 3rd position open?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So what happened with that 3rd candidate is he's still interested in relocating to Vermont. He's currently a Florida resident. Due to some family health issues, a family member that lives with him, he was unable to relocate immediately. They're trying to navigate that to see if there's some other living arrangements for that family member to allow him to move. But that's what happened with the 3rd candidate.
So it's still, this is not really a change in a situation. It sounds like the staffing scenario has not changed. It's just that there's some delay with this one candidate.
Right, and you know, there's no guarantee that he'll even be here. We're still actively recruiting. We actually have 2 more fine candidates that have trying to navigate through the process to get through the basic testing into the police academy, and hopefully one of them will do that by December 1st.
So to my recollection, the conversation in April had been to add a 3rd position specifically because of the candidate pool. So I do see a difference here, like if the candidate pool has changed, why do we still want to move forward with 3 new hires?
So the names have changed, but there's still, our 2 top candidates are both from the BIPOC community. So we're still looking to diversify the police department, just different people. And the reason that we would still follow through on this 3rd hire is we have the anticipated retirement of Detective Neese sometime between, I think, realistically, he said January 1st and May 1st is when he's anticipating retiring, and this was going to be his replacement.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I wanted to note on the last page, the welfare check updates. You know, I certainly have heard a bit about space, the Winooski Falls space, and I've seen increased foot patrol down there. I've seen you know, additional parks and public works staff working on cleaning up some of the litter down in the area. I think that goes a long way to make it feel like a safe space for all residents and business occupants to use and utilize. So just appreciate the responsiveness to that. So thank you for capturing that here.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think this is something to call out for members of the public who aren't sure what we are doing to address those concerns, that the PD is really actively involved.
I can do a little summary if you'd like.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So through Front Porch Forum and some other social media avenues, I'm sure most people know that we have a small homeless population that's kind of congregating between the parking garage, Champlain Mill underneath the bridge, and the bus stop. It's a complex issue. You know, these people are not only facing homelessness, but some have mental health issues, substance abuse and alcohol issues. Obviously, they're homeless, which is a whole other issue. And a lot of the complaints that we have are pretty benign. You know, they're open containers, public urination, things that make people uncomfortable, but not necessarily high-level crimes. And what we try to do, rather than ticket these people, is we try to go down and continuously not on a daily basis, but I'd say several times a week that we're down there and we try to interact with them and just remind them of behaviors. And if they want the bus stop to stay unlocked and a place to get out of the cold, that they need to act in a certain way and not make people uncomfortable that do want to use those services, and encourage them, to discontinue the inappropriate behaviors that make people uncomfortable. But when you're dealing with people with some mental health issues, their behavior isn't something that they can always control, and it makes people uncomfortable. And that's why we try to have as many contacts along with the community outreach team with these people as often as possible to support them.
Thank you for that. I know it's an ongoing challenge that your team faces, and something most of us don't have to address on our own. I have one more question on one of the updates on here, probably potentially for Yaz, under the WCC work. The part about develop and executing a plan for commission outreach for membership and appointments. Just wondering if there's any specific challenge, may just be capacity or support, that would be useful to help with that effort.
And I can jump in too while Yaz is getting online here. She and I spoke a little bit about this last week in preparing this. I think we've had some good luck with recruiting membership for commissions. So we've seen a lot of those seats that were vacant early in the year fill, which is great. I think one of the things that in a few instances we're still struggling with, and Yaz had done some analysis in partnership with IBG as part of our equity audit, is that the commissions still are not getting to a point of being representative of the community from a demographic perspective, which is why we left that as a yellow. So, oh, there you go. And Yaz, I'm gonna hand it to you from here.
Sorry, I just stepped out for a second. Just go ahead and repeat the question for me.
Yeah, I was just asking for the commission outreach and membership, if there's specific support you're looking for, or is this more of a wait and see what the audit reveals before making a plan?
Yeah, not currently, because one part of the audit is actually community engagement, like stakeholder engagement in the municipal process. So once we are able to kind of really identify where the gaps are there and kind of where we're falling flat when it comes to recruitment and getting people engaged with the city, then we'll be able to take their recommendations and create a strategic plan to address it. So that is kind of a wait and see situation.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from council on this update? Anything else staff is seeking feedback on or want to highlight?
I don't think so.
Any questions from the public?
I guess one more question, and Jim, I think you might be able to speak to this too. How are the conversations going with the school resource officer? When's the next meeting for that?
Sure, and John, feel free to jump in as well, since you've been on all the same conversations I've had. So they are continuing, and we've had, it seems like the consultant has had a challenge in securing participation from students and to some extent teachers. And I think there was a bit of a question as to why this was happening, but I got the sense from our last meeting that part of it is a bit of fatigue on the types of questions that are being asked, and that the school board has already done a process for this discussion. And there's a sense that maybe some of the teachers and students felt that they've already answered this question around what safety and security is. And so for us to ask that question again isn't really motivating for attendance. So that's my read on how the conversations have progressed. We had a good discussion with Chief Hebert and Jason, Officer Zeiter and Sean McMahon, superintendent, where they presented their materials, and we got to dive into some of the kind of mechanisms that they have. And we had this stakeholder listening session last week. I think the group seems to be pivoting towards what models of safety and security and that could or could not include an SRO might be, and putting those up as potential options to discuss and using that as a way to engage people in a new conversation that hasn't been had yet. So I think that's where I see this process going. The timeline is extremely tight, and the likelihood that we can actually have fully vetted models done by the time the November 15th due date comes by is pretty much impossible. So I think the group is going to have more work to do. If the group decides to recommend this, there could be more work to do beyond the November end date. That's my read on it right now. But John, I don't know if you have a different take on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think we'll know for city budget purposes what we're gonna need to do. But I think, like Councilor Duncan said, the work's gonna continue. As we're just sort of diving into, I think, some of the meat of this discussion and looking at the different models that could be implemented, but then having to circle back with the school and Chief Heber and others to see, you know, operationally, how does that look? What are the costs? So it's not, you know, it's not something we're gonna have I don't think we're gonna have a full recommendation by November, but it'll continue.
Yeah, and the superintendent will be in touch with us by that, right after, following that 15th deadline, so that we know for budget planning.
Thanks. Appreciate the update.
Anything else? All right. Before we move on to item G, I would like to call a 5-minute recess. So may we reconvene? I have 7:36. Let's reconvene at 7:41 p.m. Oh. I am muted. Okay. All right, it is 7:41, so let's reconvene the Winooski City Council meeting. We are on item G in the regular agenda. This is an update on the city manager hiring process. So what you have before you is a memo where I have attempted to capture what we discussed at our last meeting about how to move forward with this process. And then I also just wanted to update verbally. You know, we had, when we talked about the hiring process at our last meeting, we had basically instructed staff to come back to our next meeting, so this one, 2 weeks later, with a recruiter recommendation. But after speaking with our HR director about that, like, it wasn't viable. So we have extended that timeline. We are expecting in December to get a recommendation from staff on a recruiter to engage. So in the interim, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, what I've outlined here reflects what you recall from the discussion and how you want to see this hiring process proceed.
So you just said, so aim to bring recommendations November 1st is what's in the memo. I thought I heard you say December.
I might have typoed it. Yeah, where does it say that? Yeah, it does say November 1st. Staff should be bringing us a recommendation for the first meeting in December. That is December 1st. So that's a typo that I will ask to have corrected.
Okay.
Thank you. Jim.
So the next step is in December 1st, we would get a recommendation on a recruiter to engage to then begin the process. So we would be waiting until then to take the next step.
Yeah, so, and I tried to capture that here too. Like, we talked about working with the recruiter to establish a realistic timeline and maybe get input on our process. So I think that's also, if we go with a staff recommendation, like engage a recruiter, then we can have some follow-up with them to really finalize what the process and timeline look like at a more firm level than what we're talking about here. And Phoebe, I see your hand is raised.
Thanks. And I just want to clarify that I have gotten quotes from a number of executive search firms. So there is a possibility that we will be able to bring a recommendation sooner than December 1st. But as Christine mentioned, there is a lot of back and forth when talking to those executive search firms about the scope and the planning, and there's a lot of information sharing even before we get to the point of getting a sort of robust proposal. So there's a lot of back and forth that goes into kind of the early stages, but the December 1st is at the latest deadline.
Go ahead, Jim.
So kind of, I guess that would kind of, I think answers what my next question will be, but is this an issue of timing in our scheduling such that you don't have multiple options between November 15th and December 1st, sorry, whatever our second November meeting is and our first December meeting is, like, if we met in between that, would you have a recommendation ready, or is it that you really need until December 1st?
I think it's possible that if we met between those two dates that we could have a recommendation ready.
All right, there's some commotion here. I think my kind of leading to that was, if there is a need that council comes back in between that, like, I don't want our process to dictate the timeline if we don't have to. So if the only thing that's in the way is our meeting schedule, I would hope that you can potentially consider a special session for that action if we need to. And obviously that's up to you, Madam Mayor, but something I put out there.
Yeah, if Phoebe tells me I feel like we're ready to present you with something, then I can solicit the rest of council to see if that's possible. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Does this memo look good? Okay. So wanted to make sure we had a general update there. Don't need any votes on this. Moving on to item G, this is on for discussion and approval. This is an interim city manager appointment. So Wendy, would you like to come up and join us? Thank you. So, at our last meeting in executive session, we met with Wendy Harrison, a candidate for, it looks like I'm pointing at you, but over here. She is a professional town administrator and provides interim service as a career. And so after speaking with her, working with staff, council, we had a chance to meet with Wendy. We have put together an employment agreement to bring her on to be an interim as we complete the permanent search and hire process. This brings necessary capacity back to staff. You know, it's already been 4 months plus that we've been without someone in that role. And Angela can confirm this, but I believe the rates and everything that are in here, we can cover this with what we had already budgeted for the permanent manager position.
That is correct, in addition to the hiring firm.
So this is not news to anyone on council, but would like to give you, Wendy, a moment to introduce yourself to the public.
Thank you, Mayor, and hello, council and staff and members of the public. My name is Wendy Harrison. Sorry, I can't be fully, I'm the masked person. I have been in local government for 25 years. In Vermont, I've served as a town manager, as a village manager, and as a town administrator. I've also worked with a housing trust in Windham County. I live in Brattleboro. I'm going to be commuting on a regular basis. I'm also very active in transit, which that came up today. I serve on the local transit authority. Most of my career was in Florida, where I did local government management as a profession, and then I also served as a council member in the town of Jupiter, which was good experience, and I think it helps me to help councils. One of the roles that I would play here is to give the community time to make a thoughtful search for a permanent manager so that you don't need to be in a rush. It's a really important process. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've admired Winooski from afar. You're doing some really neat things. I expect to learn from the community. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Wendy or about this agreement or?
I was wondering if it would be worth mentioning areas of focus during this time period.
Oh, yeah. So in the interim role, Wendy is going to be covering sort of basic government operations, keeping things on the tracks with the city, with City Hall. And then she will also be able to help take the lead on the budget planning process, ARPA, outreach and discussions and planning, and town meeting day and all resident voting, and supporting the clerk's office with that outreach and preparation. We can also, as needed, add additional special, projects and initiatives to her plate. But those are the ones that we discussed basic for starting out. Are there any questions from the public? All right, I am seeking a motion to approve the interim city manager appointment of Wendy Harrison.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. And I'll see you in the morning.
Yes. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So we are going to move on to item I. This is on for approval. This is a municipal planning grant resolution. There are two of these, Heather, and I suspect they're related.
They are related. So we have applied for municipal planning grants for various initiatives and received them for the past 5 years. So this one is the standard one. So I am requesting approval to apply for the municipal planning grant in the amount of $22,000. The match for that, I would plan to do $3,300, which is slightly more than what's required of the grant application, but it gives us extra. So it's been a practice that I've taken up over the last couple of grant applications. And that is already included in the proposed FY23 community development budget, the CDC budget. So we would utilize the grant to allow the continuation of our equity policy work specific to housing by allowing the city to hire a consultant to develop an equitable housing plan for Winooski. So this really builds on the FY22 council priority goal of looking at housing quality issues in the city, which we're just starting. So specific concerns that have been brought up in the community are things like the absence, of incentivizing multi-bedroom housing for larger family sizes and looking at ways to close systemic gaps in access to safe, healthy, and affordable housing. So what we have going on right now with the equity consultants, IBG, one of their focus areas is housing. So we will use the results of that to then feed into this consultant's work. And it may be that we work with IBG again on this to take a deeper dive into housing equity. Happy to answer any questions about that piece.
Thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
So like reading through this and the next one about bylaw modernization, I feel like we have this information. It's in conversation. We talk about challenges that we know exist, and we know what our goals are. It feels to me like we've kind of had a capacity gap in being able to bridge that versus like a lack of information.
I think in some cases that's true. We haven't delved into housing quality issues at all on the Housing Commission. And one of the things, we've taken it a step at a time working through different issues. I suspect that we're going to find that there are big things that we need to shift in order to address housing quality, just based on the fact that we have some of the oldest housing stock in Chittenden County and, on average 20 years older than Chittenden County as a whole. So I think that probably there are some gaps here that we have not yet begun to discuss. And there will be some things that will emerge from that will need recommendations on changing. I also think that sometimes having an external set of eyes bringing forward recommendations to some of our boards and commissions may help to really make the case for making some changes. So that's my hope here.
Thanks. That makes sense. Jim?
And Heather, do you think this will intersect with the public building registry work as well?
I do, yes. I think that absolutely will come into play here as well.
Okay, and one sense I've had about that is that it would contain some of our housing quality issues will overlap with that, and there may be a substantial portion of that circle that won't. So this grant presumably allows us to take that public building registry discussion a step outside that circle. Is that something you could see coordinated through this?
That's exactly how I'm envisioning this. So there are multiple priority areas within the housing work plan this year that would really fall under this and kind of be synthesized by the consultant here.
When you say action-oriented steps, are you thinking like recommendations that would come to council on changes to policy and ordinance that would specifically address some of the shortfalls that people have already identified, as the mayor was pointing out, that we know what some of the gaps are. These would actually be like, this is how you would change it.
And it would be a slate of things. So wouldn't just it may be some of it would be bylaw changes to our zoning, some of it would be ordinance changes. I think there's a bunch of different things that would work in conjunction to assist with those.
Thanks.
Are there other council questions? Any questions from the public? I'm excited about what I'm hearing in detail. Can I have a motion to approve the municipal planning grant resolution?
So moved.
Motion by Bryn.
Second.
Second by Hal. All those in
Yes.
favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item J, bylaw modernization grant resolution.
Yep, so this is a new opportunity that's being offered in FY '22. So the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development has $500,000 to grant to municipalities for land use development and zoning bylaw updates in support of pedestrian-oriented development pattern that increases housing choice and affordability within smart growth areas, which we absolutely are. So again, based on the Housing Commission and Planning Commission's interest in looking at zoning bylaw updates to support the development of multi-bedroom units and affordable housing in Winooski, this request would be authorization to submit an application for the bylaw modernization grant. And the grant would again be utilized to hire a consultant to work with the community, the Housing Commission, and the Planning Commission to develop recommendations and draft language for zoning changes that would support the Winooski Master Plan housing goals. So I think really part of this is facilitating a community conversation about our values and about how we could go action items that we could change in our bylaws that would support those values.
Thanks. And, you know, we charge planning and to a supportive extent housing with bringing us recommendations for updating incentives to increase housing that meets our goals. More than 2 years ago, it's been a long conversation and there's been a bit of struggle there. So I could see this being helpful in ushering that process along.
Yeah, and also what I would ask, I believe working with a consultant, is that they use the Zoning for Great Neighborhoods publication from the state, which specifically covers bylaws that we might look at, and then work with the Planning Commission on draft language that would work for us in Winooski based on community feedback. And I think that will create a level of comfort that might allow this to move forward in a way that it hasn't thus far.
Yeah, and a lot of our regulations kind of align to pieces of that Zoning for Great Neighborhoods already, which is a well-researched, recommendations that have come from the state of Vermont.
Yeah, and the Housing Commission is, I have been charged with drafting a memo on behalf of the Housing Commission to the Planning Commission, calling out and highlighting the specific areas where we're already doing well and areas where a deeper dive into our bylaws might be helpful and what specific action items would be useful. So we're kind of starting the ball rolling from the Housing Commission, and this would be taking the next step with that.
Are there any questions from council on this one?
So you said, Heather, that this is a new grant, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So I think this may be one-time funds that may be ARPA. I know that this is the first time that this has been offered, and I believe it's a one-time situation. And I did not mention, but I have included a match in the FY '23 community development budget for this. But if we actually adopt the bylaw changes as a result of this, the match is forgiven.
Is there a timeline when that adoption would have to happen in order for the match to be forgiven?
It would be by the completion of the grant. So generally it would be, if we received it in January, it would be in FY '23. It would be probably May of FY '23.
It feels like a tight timeline.
It is a tight timeline. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, considering that we want to be moving this forward. So I think that's more an incentive at this juncture.
And is 25 the max that you can apply for?
Yes.
25,000, I should say.
Yes.
Okay. So is this primarily just to ensure that I'm clear with what the intent is primarily to facilitate a community conversation?
I think it's to facilitate a community conversation that I think is necessary for us to know which pieces to move on and to feel comfortable moving on those pieces, but also to draft language, to assist in drafting the language with the Planning Commission so that there's a comfort level that we aren't opening all kinds of strange loopholes. And that's something that I've seen previously as a concern, that in moving forward with any draft language, we may be opening ourselves up to all kinds of unintended consequences. So I really think that facilitating role is important.
I appreciate that. I definitely think that there would be concern. So I think anticipating that and addressing that head on with an opportunity like this makes sense.
Any questions from the public on this item? Hearing no concern, would someone like to move to approve the bylaw modernization grant resolution?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And next is item K. This is on for approval. This is a Winooski small business loan application.
Yep, so this has been warned with an executive session in case you want to get further details. You know, there's confidential bank records that are included in the materials that we consider as a loan committee. But we have received a loan application for a tier 3 loan. Those tier 3 loans are considered higher risk loans, and they're really the purpose of our loan program in general. We try to be the lender of last resort for people who don't have access to traditional forms of credit. So the council appointed loan committee met on October 7th to evaluate the application based on the program criteria established in the policy guidelines for the fund. The committee recommends approval of a $30,000 loan. The loan application was for $60,000. Based on the scoring on the evaluation criteria came in at 50% score out of a possible 100%, which is the bare minimum in order to be awarded a loan. We've set that threshold as a committee. You must have at least 50% of those points in order to be awarded. And so we've aligned the award amount with that 50% and come in with a recommendation to approve a $30,000 loan for Hype Nutrition on Winooski Falls Way. And with this loan program, there's no limitation on the number of times you can come back and ask for another loan. So our recommendation would be that should the business need additional funding after completion of one successful year of payments, they could come back with another application for remaining funds if they so desired.
All right, so it's time for any questions from council. If Heather, if someone asks a question that you think should not be addressed publicly, please let me know and I can.
Yeah, we don't really want to talk too much about personal financial situation, business owner financial situation, but at a high level, if you have questions, happy to take those and I'll let you know.
Can you speak to the structure of the loan program?
Which piece of the structure?
So clearly there are at least 2 tiers, a tier 3 and tier 4. So
yep, sure.
There are 2 others. How are we backing that? What are,
sure.
Just a little bit more detail about the program structure.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. So we established the program in 2016, and there are 3 tiers that banks refer to: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 loans. So initially, we only were really looking at supporting tier 3 loans, and those are about amount of credit worthiness and risk. The tier 4 that came in is at the beginning of COVID, when I rewrote the program to create the emergency bridge grants for businesses during COVID when they were shut down. So many of our businesses were shut down. So we just called that a tier 4 because we already had a tier system. So that's not really related to the tier system that's used by banks. But so we generally fund tier 3 and tier 4. And this is not eligible for a COVID emergency grant. The business did not exist in Winooski during the closures for COVID. So this is a new business. So we went back to the original tier 3 loan. So if they didn't qualify for a bank loan, then they come to our program and we consider them as a tier 3 loan.
And is this a 0% interest loan? Is that the structure?
No, it is not. It's giving them access to a loan that they wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Okay.
So it is not, we're not paying down interest on this as we would with the tier 4 loans, as we did with the tier 4 loans.
Okay.
Mike?
Yes, considering it's a high risk loans, what is the protocol if the loan is not paid back?
Yeah, so these are all high risk loans. So every one of the tier 3 loans that we give, it's a high risk loan. So nothing different here. And we have had a business default on loans. So we have in our MOU with Opportunities Credit Union, they can, perform a service for us trying to collect on those loans. We have not done that in the past. Generally, they will do, I think it's 60 days worth of collections, and then our fund will pay off that loan. So it's all credited against our funds. So currently, I also did not say that currently we have $206,627.86 available in the fund. So it's nowhere near used up, but they are all high risk, Mike. So there's always a possibility that they won't perform.
And there's really no protocol to lien wages or anything to get the money back, correct?
I mean, we could technically pursue all avenues, but I think that it has been the city's perspective that these are risks we're willing to take in order to support people having a leg up and starting businesses in our community. So it's not been really our perspective that we want to chase people down when they're already having a business failure.
So how many loans have we given out since this started? Do you recall?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's a handful. It's probably about 10. Angela, do you know off the top of your head?
Since the most recent iteration, we have granted, I believe, 3, but 1 declined.
Oh yeah, that the tier 3, you mean? Emergency loans, we've given out several of those as well.
I'm just looking for a track record. Are they more success stories, or are they more just handing money out?
They're more success stories than not.
Perfect.
Yeah, most of the tier 4 COVID relief loans have been paid back in full already. We only have 1 outstanding, and then the remaining tier 3 loan that was issued is currently performing.
That's great. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Jim?
What's the general, like, how many loans have ended up in this 50% scoring eligibility range, right? Like, are they usually, do we have many, are the bulk meeting higher scoring eligibility?
The bulk are higher. We have declined emergency loans to at least 1 business that scored lower than that. So we have applied the threshold in the past. Generally, they've been higher than 50%.
Any questions from the public? All right, if there are no more questions from council, somebody could make a motion to approve this small business loan application.
So moved.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On to item I, also on for approval. This is the Winooski Small Business Loan Committee appointment.
Yeah, so in meeting to review this with the loan fund committee, it occurred to me that I would like to have the equity director be part of the staff contingent of the Small Business Loan Committee. So if you'll recall, the charter set up the committee slightly differently than some of our other committees so that we would be able to maintain a quorum just with staff members when there was less interest from the community in participating on this particular committee. And part of the reason for that is because the committee meets only as needed to consider loan applications. So in this case, it's been over a year since we last met. So it doesn't keep people engaged in the way, community members engaged in the way that one might hope. So it's tough to keep people available. So what I am recommending is appointing our equity director position. And Yaz as the equity director now, but the position as an ex officio member of this committee as a staff alternate.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns from council?
I just wanted to be clear on terminology. So in one place it says ex officio and another it says alternate, and I just want to make sure are we using those terms synonymously?
No, ex officio meaning by that role, and alternate. So that role is an alternate on this committee as of the way that the charter is currently written.
Right.
Rather than a regular member.
Okay.
Because we had specified that the other ex officio positions, so the planning manager, the finance director, and the city manager are regular positions, and we still have seats for alternates. It would have to be coming in as an alternate unless we rewrite the entire charter for the committee.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Does someone want to make a motion to approve the Winooski Small Business Loan Committee appointment as written?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
We are on to item M. This is on for discussion or approval. Our fire marshal position description update. Chief Audi still here? Yes. Welcome back.
So I'll just quickly introduce this item. So as noted in the cover sheet, we have a vacancy. Liam Keating resigned. And so consistent with our compensation policy, we looked at the job description and the structure of that role, and Chief Audi has done a lot of analysis in terms of what will work best for the department, and we have presented this updated job description for a fire marshal to you for approval. And obviously Chief Audi is here and can answer any specific questions that you have about this job description.
Thank you. Mike.
Hey, Chief. Is this position going to be offered in-house? And you're looking outside as well?
So following our general hiring practices, this is posted internally first and then external.
Will this change in job description have an impact on the budget?
So that's addressed on the cover. So it's neutral impact. So we looked at hours, this position, days of the week that this position would work. And we were able to shift some of the part-time staff monies, particularly the per diem staff that we bring in for coverage, and apply it here. I feel that will bring a more consistent staffing model than what we currently have.
Mike?
Yeah, I got another question. I see the rank, it's ranked as battalion chief. isn't there a battalion chief on payroll now?
So we have a part-time battalion chief that answers nighttime calls. So it's not unusual to, a battalion chief usually leads a specific division of a fire department. So the part-time battalion chief currently is suppression. When there's a fire call, he responds. This position would lead the fire prevention community risk reduction, be the lead on those efforts, lead that division, if you will.
Are there any other questions? Any questions from the public? All right, sounds like someone might want to make a motion to approve the fire marshal position description update.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to the end of our regular agenda. We did have a potential executive session warned in case it was needed for the manager hiring process, but we did not need to use that, so we will be skipping that. And that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. So I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion by Mike, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Night.
Bye.
Right.
Good night.